Hello, and welcome to a tutorial on how sieges work in Europa Universalis V. It goes without saying that EU5 is a very complex game with many mechanics to learn and explore. Sieges might seem like a drop in the bucket in the ocean of stuff to learn for this game, but if you're going to win wars, you do need to win sieges, and the mechanics of it might not be immediately familiar. So in this tutorial, we're only going to focus on this aspect of war because if you can understand what it is you're waiting for during a siege, or what it is you're trying to do with this mechanic, it will make winning your wars that much easier. In the future, I will do a full tutorial on war, but for now, let's focus specifically on sieges. In our example, we're going to start with Castile and work towards sieging the cities of Granada in order to subjugate them. First things first, let's declare war. We can see here who will immediately be in the war. Right now, it's just us against them. Down here, you can see your casus belli. We're right at the game's start, so the only casus belli we have is no casus belli. It'll cost us 24.97 stability, and right now we have 29. It'll also add 1.99 to our war exhaustion. You can see here why we need to be mindful of war exhaustion. In Castile, if we reach 19.4, it'll cause us to capitulate. But at game start, we're at 0, so adding 1.99 is fine. Lastly, it'll add antagonism against us with the following countries. So let's set our casus belli and declare war. We don't have a general yet, so let's add one. On the tooltip, you can see what each attribute adds to the general. We want a general with high administrative ability in order to get this bonus to our siege ability. You can see all the modifiers the various attributes add and can create specialized armies around the general. Since we're focusing on sieging, we'll take the general with the highest administrative ability. You can sort by attribute, so let's sort by admin ability. This general has 100 administrative ability, and when we bring up the tooltip, you can see that gives us a full plus 10% to siege ability. After we start the siege, we'll be able to see the effects of this in another tooltip. So let's add the general. When you add a general, it does take some time for them to join the army. If you bring up the tooltip on the general, you can see it's going to take them a week to join up with the first army. Back to the military screen, we're going to raise all of our levies. You can see here, you can pick specific locations to take levies from, or you can use this button up here to raise all levies. Remember, raising levies takes pops away from their job, so sometimes you might not want to take levies from specific locations. We actually don't need all of them since we heavily outnumber Granada, but we'll raise all of them for the purpose of the video. You can see an icon on the places that levies are being raised. When we unpause, you'll see the progress go up on each. However, before we unpause, we should move our navy over to Granada's sea zones because we will need them for one of the sieges. We do need to set an admiral for them. Just like with generals, admirals have specific bonuses based on their attributes. What will help us the most with one of the sieges we will be doing is the administrative ability and the bonus to blockade efficiency. However, in general, what is most helpful at game start with your first admiral is getting one with a high diplomatic ability in order to raise your maritime presence. I'll have a video in the future about maritime presence and control, but for now, know that you should probably pick the admiral with the higher diplomatic ability at game start. But for the purpose of our video, we'll pick the one with the higher admin ability. Let's sort by administrative ability and pick our admiral. And now we'll move the navy to the Granadan sea zone. Now you can see the progress of the levies being raised, and now they're fully raised. We're going to create two armies. The larger army will have the regulars plus levies, and a second army will have the 4 armies in the south here. You can hold shift and select the armies that you want specifically. After doing that, you can click this button up here to merge to strongest unit. With the armies in the north here, you can just click and drag your mouse to select all of them. And same thing, merge to strongest unit. Since we created a new army, we need a new general. Once again, let's sort by admin ability so that we can get the general that'll give us the highest bonus to sieging. Now let's move the armies to the cities we want to siege. We'll move this second army right outside of this city because we want to focus on that siege second. And this army will move directly to this city. We'll start here since our army has just arrived in the location and the siege has just begun. Let's take a look at the UI and see what's going on. Sieges are broken up into siege phases. This number over here shows you how many days it takes a siege phase to complete. Right now, it's at 22 days. Hover your mouse over the number to bring up the tooltip, and you'll see how those number of days are calculated. The base length for a siege phase is 30 days. First, we'll compare the primary cultures in our countries. The attacking side uses their cultural influence value, and the defensive side uses their cultural tradition value. The current cultural influence of the Castilian culture is 36.23, and the current cultural tradition value of the Andalusi culture is 31.34. Think of cultural influence as a culture's attack score and cultural tradition as a culture's defensive score. If your cultural influence is higher than their cultural tradition, you will get a benefit to the length of siege phases. Next, it adds together the various attributes for the two competing countries. Granada's societal values lean more towards offensive than defensive, so this doesn't work in their favor and reduces siege phase by 9.85%. However, their soldiers have a level of literacy that adds 1% to the siege phase length. Next are our attributes. We get a benefit from our army tradition. We also lean towards offensive with societal values, and the amount that we lean towards offensive gives us a plus 4% to siege ability. Lastly, remember, we chose a general that had a 100 administrative ability, giving us a plus 10% siege ability, and we can see that reflected here. When you add these values together, you get 23.35. So we get a reduction of the siege phase length by 23.3%, reflected in the UI as negative 24% to siege phase length. The base length is 30 days, so 30 times 0.2335 equals a reduction of the number of days by 7.005. Because that number is over 7, even so slightly, this will result in a reduction of 8 days. So in this siege, the siege phase will last 22 days. This number right here, the negative 49%, this is the number you're most concerned with. This number will change at the conclusion of each siege phase length. Right here, you'll see the outcome of a die roll. At the conclusion of every siege phase, a d14 will be rolled. That means you will roll a die that will give you an outcome between the numbers of 1 to 14. Ultimately, what you are trying to do here is get a roll of 20 or above. Once you reach 20, the defending forces will surrender and you'll win the siege. Now, obviously, you can't roll a 20 on a d14, which is why these modifiers are important. All of these modifiers are added to your die roll. The first one here is siege accumulation. At the end of every siege phase, 1 will be added to this number with a maximum of 11. So the longer a siege lasts, the higher the probability you will get a die roll of 20 and win the siege. Next is the fort level. This location has a level 2 fort, so every die roll will get a negative 2 modifier. You can see now why your forts are so important. Next is the artillery impact. Based on the level of artillery your army has, you will get a modifier added to your die roll. Lastly are breaches. This is the amount of times the walls have been breached. Based on that, you will get a modifier to the die roll as well. This negative 49% is giving you the percentage that at the end of the current siege phase, you will roll a 20 or higher. Remember, when I say roll, I mean the d14 roll plus all the modifiers. Right now, surrender is impossible because there's no way for us to roll the 20 at the end of this phase. The only modifiers we have add up to negative 2, so the maximum our roll can be is 12, which is why these three outcomes have a 0% chance of happening. Right here, we see the size of the garrison for the fort. In order for this siege to progress, we need to have at least as many soldiers as the garrison. This number up here is the supply limit of the location. You can see how the limit is calculated and how the usage is calculated. So it compares the supply limit of the location to the unit weight of our army. You can see here the weight of this army, and bringing up the tooltip will show you how it's calculated. This is important because the weight of the army will determine how much supply they need. If your army's weight is over the supply limit, you'll start to face attrition, meaning you'll start to lose soldiers. Remember, if the size of your army falls below the size of the garrison, the siege will stop. However, each of these siege outcomes has a cost to the size of the garrison. Disease outbreak will make the garrison lose 5% of their strength. Status quo will result in no change to the garrison. Supply shortage will make the garrison lose 2% of their strength. Food shortage will make them lose 3%. Water shortage will result in a loss of 5%. Defender's desert will make them lose 10%. And of course, surrender means the siege is over, the number you're aiming for. These percentage chances will change based on what you can possibly roll. Let's let one siege phase complete to see how they change. We just completed one siege phase. You can see here we rolled a 5. Bringing up the tooltip, you can see that the modifier is still -2 because of the level of fort. So our roll of 5 -2 for the modifiers, and our roll for the phase is 3. That brings us to status quo. Remember, under status quo, nothing changes. So we actually don't get a siege phase accumulation on that. Our next siege phase completed, we rolled a 4, add in the modifiers of -2, and we rolled a 2, and once again, we got a status quo, so we don't get a siege phase added in. So the next siege phase completed, we rolled a 13 on the die, and that added in a level of siege phase. So now when we look at the modifiers, we are at -1. We get the 1 plus the -2, and that gives us a -1. And so our last roll was 12, which gave them food shortage. And so now you can see the percentage chances have changed. Our modifiers now equal -1. The highest we can roll on the die is a 14. So that means the highest we can get for the phase roll is 13, which is why everything from water shortage to surrender is at a 0%. And then the percentage chance is showing you the percentage that your roll will land in any of those specific outcomes. So this time we rolled a 14 and we received a breach to the wall. So now when we add up our modifiers, it's actually at a +2. So now we can get all the way up to defender's desert, but we still can't get surrender. This time we rolled a 13. Our phase accumulation is up to 6. So now the modifier is at a +5, which means the highest number we can roll is 19, one shy of surrender. So we still, at the end of this phase, cannot win this siege. You can see here how the size of the garrison is going down with every siege phase because of these outcomes. We now rolled a 10. Siege phase is up to 9. So now our modifier will be a +8. So now we can roll a surrender. And you see how this number is now positive. Now this number will reflect the percentage of rolling surrender. We rolled a 2. Now our modifier is a +9. So our roll is an 11. And now you can see that under the outcomes, we've lost the previous ones that cannot be rolled anymore. So for example, there can no longer be a status quo because of the size of our modifier. It's impossible to get a roll that low. This time we rolled a 5. Now our siege accumulation is up to 11. This is the highest the siege accumulation can be. So now our modifiers won't change unless we can get a breach to the wall maybe. So our modifier will be a +10. But remember, we are trying to get to at least a 20. So any roll of 10 or above and the siege will end. And there it is. We rolled at least a 10. It tells you here the siege lasted 229 days. And now we have taken the location and the castle. Now we have this city over here, and we have our second army that we moved right outside the city because there's something a little bit different about this siege because the location is on the coast. So let's move our army in there. So now the siege has begun, but you can see there's an extra modifier here for blockades. The defenders will get a -1 to the siege roll because this city is on the coast and not being blockaded. In order to counter this, we need to move our navy into this sea node. And now you'll see, once they move in there, we will lose that modifier. And now that modifier is at a 0. So if you are defending a siege and your location is on the coast and the enemy has ships in that sea node, it is worth engaging those ships to destroy them because that will add a defensive modifier to the siege roll. You can also see why your level of fort is very helpful and very important. Right now, these cities only have a level 2 fort, but if it were higher, it can very well counter this siege accumulation modifier as that goes up. So now you can see how the various modifiers in a siege drastically affect the outcome of it. The general you choose is important. It's probably more effective to have an army you use specifically for sieges so that you can have the appropriate general attached to it. The different attributes offer various things, and you want to utilize those bonuses accordingly. When defending against a siege, remember if their forces don't outnumber your garrison, the siege will end. In this example, we have a much larger force, and they have a very small garrison. However, you you might have a situation where you have an army that's much smaller than the one sieging your city. It's worth engaging that army in battle, even if it's a certain loss, because the battle will dwindle their numbers. If you can get their numbers low enough, you might be able to stall or even end the siege. Same thing goes for the sieging army's supply. Remember, if the sieging army's weight is higher than the supply limit of the location, the army will face attrition and lose soldiers. If you can hold out long enough during a siege, you can dwindle their numbers down. And lastly, you can now see why your level of fort is important. The higher the fort level, the more you can keep the phase roll modifier down. This will make the siege take longer and give you more time to possibly mount a defense against the sieging army. If you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like and the channel a subscribe. Every Thursday, I do 2 live streams of EU5, and you'll get notified when I go live. A very big thank you to the channel members for helping to keep this going. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your support. That's it for now. As always, be awesome.